Welcome back everybody. Today we're testing the new Storm Incite. If you like what we do, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and check us out on Patreon. A big thank you to Jeff Miller and Ron Hoppy. Don't forget to check out Haley's Pro Shop in Burlington, Washington for world-class drilling and coaching. First impressions, the Incite feels very strong and very responsive. Is this really a master line ball? Alright, so let's jump in. I wasn't totally sure what to expect with the Incite or its intent for that matter. I mean, since I've developed my arsenal categorization, I always think about balls in terms of where they slot. So even if there is a variation in ball reaction, I try to simplify it so first you know where it goes and then how it might compare to other balls. But the bigger question for me is, what's the logical order Storm is trying to create here? This looks like another mild asymmetric ball like the Rubicon. They also just released the Proton Physics, which is very strong. The Incite introduces the R4S hybrid cover stock. We've seen this formulation in Solid and Pearl on the Fight and Street Fight respectively. In fact, I recently tested the International Dual Lock, which uses the Pearl, and as I said, it was pretty smooth off the end of the pattern. I think a lot of people saw that with the Fights as well, and I don't think they made that much traction in general. However, the hybrid seems to be kind of the clear Goldilocks, way more responsive than any R4S we've seen before. It's strong, it gives a good read through the oil, yet still has quite a bit of responsiveness down lane. I don't think I could play the Incite from direct lines if my life depended on it. It's just too responsive. Typically, I can get strong balls to work right around the third arrow on a house, and this one required me to get just past that before I found the pocket. I had a very good look between the third and fourth arrow. Ultimately, I could miss out and it came roaring back. Missing in isn't really a good place to miss with the Incite. Honestly, as I thought about what it compares to, and I was watching my shots as I was editing the video, I started to think of the Storm Lock. It's a 3000 grit hybrid that's strong and consistently responsive, and that kind of instantly reminded me of the Lock. A ball you can trust will always turn over. It might be a touch smoother, but I think you might be hard pressed to distinguish them if you kind of did one of those black and white comparison type. From a two-hand perspective, I'm just going to keep it short. Honestly, I just about found this ball near impossible for me. I couldn't find the spot on the lanes deep enough to work in front of the ball, ball return. I just don't have enough speed for this strong and this much responsiveness down lane. I was able to make balls like the Proton Physics and the Forged Flare work, but those I could really get to stop with a very forward roll. And I couldn't get that to happen with the Tensor Core. It's just still too round and I couldn't quite get it to quit. Sean is next, and at a high level the ball looked pretty good for him. He didn't quite see as strong a ball relative to his game, but the more important characteristic is the defined, trustworthy move off the spot. And that's the same that I saw. His game, while higher rev rate and more speed than my one-hand game, is still more or less rev speed matched, unlike my two-hand game. Therefore, he was likely to see characteristics, I would say, closer to my one-hand test. He didn't have to open up the lanes hugely or anything. It seemed very manageable, and frankly, that was the same relative reaction we saw for the Rubicon. I found the Incite and the Rubicon very strong. He found them almost benchmark strength. Obviously, different styles, axis rotation, etc. Final thoughts. I can't help but place the Storm Incite in the strong defined category. It's very different than the Proton Physics in terms of shape, but it is still strong. Maybe it's kind of mid-defined plus or strong defined minus potentially. I mean, theoretically, you can have both shapes of, like, say, a Proton and an Incite in the bag, and obviously they're different, but you better be seeing higher volume patterns or you want to be speed dominant or so. I think Sean could easily have both balls, for example, and maybe, you know, separate the surfaces, finishes a bit more. For me, I definitely need, you know, more different, maybe shine on the Incite to separate it. I actually think speed dominant bowlers will really like the Incite because of its down lane motor.